I welcome you all to the second segment of lecture number 6. In the earlier segment, the first segment of lecture number 6, we did discuss how the foreign capital was protected beyond Europe. So, in this segment, I want to focus exclusively on extraterritorial application of laws. This was one of the significant ways with which the European countries protected its nationals' investment in other countries. So, what happened with regard to the extraterritorial application? When the European countries insisted on extraterritorial application of its laws wherever its citizens went, what had happened was the property rules of European countries are now available in the context of non-European countries as well. So now the property rules of European countries are made applicable in the context of non-European countries as well, and with that the European countries even made the freedom of commerce a right, and sometimes it's even used force to justify this particular right. So, what we see here is by establishing political dominance, by signing treaties, the European countries, the capital exporting countries, started providing an enhanced level of security to the foreign investment made in other countries. I mean, it's foreign investment from the context of host state, right? But it's nationals' investments made in other countries. That is something that started coming up. An enhanced level of security started coming up. If we try and trace from where did this extraterritorial application of laws had started, or some sort of an origin point for this particular concept, then we can go back to the treaty ports of the eastern countries, particularly China and Japan. So, after the Anglo-Chinese Wars of 1836 to 1830s to 1840, then 1856 to 1860, we could see that resulted in signing of unequal treaties, and we could see that the signing of unequal treaties ended the Opium War. It established free trade zones, it conferred most favored nation treatment, and it also conferred a lot of power on British Council as well. So, what had happened the post the unequal treaties were signed between European countries and China. So, here Britain, particularly Britain and China, what we see here is Britain opened the Chinese market for merchants from other countries. Now, ideally, Britain was fighting the wars and all of it, so Britain should give special privileges to its own nationals, but Britain did not do it. Britain adopted a non-discriminatory policy because it had the vision of establishing a international commercial framework itself. So, it adopted something called a no favor fair field policy, wherein non-discriminatory access is given to even merchants from other countries as well. But still then, you could see that the Britain merchants were the one who enjoyed supremacy in access to these places, right. So, after the Anglo-Chinese War and after signing the unequal treaties, the whole system revolved around the British Council that was there in China, right. So, there was so much of power that is delegated to the Britain Council, so much so that the Britain Council could decide the disputes between Chinese nationals and the Britain national. It also provided security to Britain merchants, right. And when the whole system revolved around the British Council, what we see here is the laws of Britain was something that was applied in a foreign territory. China is technically a foreign territory, right? Since Britain Council had the governance power, the Britain Council did administer the European laws, the Britain laws in a foreign land. So, this is something you could trace the extraterritorial application of laws in the context of the Anglo-Chinese War. So, here a well-established extraterritorial application of Britain laws can be seen in the context of China. So, the similar approach is also followed in case of Japan as well. So, after the Anglo-Japanese treaties of 1854 and 1858 were signed, Britain Council had lot of power, and then this governance power were also delegated by the government, and they followed a similar suit. So the extraterritorial application of European laws afforded a greater protection for foreign investment. That is something we could see, and similar model was also followed in Africa as well. In case of Africa, what the Britain undertook a strategy where it signed trade agreements, and it used the trade agreements to exert informal influence upon the indigenous authorities to afford protection to its merchants and its merchants' investment. So that was something that it was doing. The strategy that it followed, and why would the indigenous authority even give a favorable position to Britain merchants and Britain investors? We could easily sort of infer why the protection was given from one of the letters that Britain's governor in Gambia had written, Mr. Macdonald. Macdonald had written in one of the letters that on what do English capitalists rely on? So they obviously rely on English power. Where does the English power come from? From the English troops that are present along Gambia, right? So we could see that some sort of, a threat of military intervention ensured that the protection was given to Britain investors as well. So now, but this is not a very smooth experience for Britain in Africa, at least. What had happened was, when it tried to exert influence on the local structures for affording protection to property and the investment, we could see sometimes a political unrest grow. I mean, if you keep on exercising your influence over the local legal structures, and obviously the local population would express their disappointment. So political unrest grew, which resulted in then in the direct intervention of Britain. So when with the direct intervention of Britain, we could see that it actually resulted in formal annexation of Lagos in 1861. So now the more the intervention, then eventually you will probably have to annex the territory itself. But even Britain understood direct annexation is costly, expensive, as well as time consuming. So it tried to afford protection as far as possible with less direct intervention. Whenever the direct intervention was necessary, only then Britain sort of sent its troops and all of that. Even in case of the Anglo-Chinese wars and Anglo-Japanese wars, how did the Britain Council enjoy such a position? I mean, it was delegated, the unequal treaties delegated a lot of powers to the council. But how did they enjoy such a position where they were in a position to decide dispute between Chinese national and a Britain national, where they were in a position to give protection to Britain merchants? That was because Britain Council had the power to summon gunboat intervention at any time it wanted. So the threat of military intervention gave lot of protection back in a foreign land where Britain Council had extensive powers, and that was the case even in Africa as well. The threat of direct intervention by Britain troops was the one that strengthened the position of giving a lot of protection to Britain investment. That was the arrangement. Like I discussed, direct intervention was very expensive as well as time consuming. Britain also knew about it. But what was happening here was, there was growing industrial capitalism. Industrialization is happening at a fast pace, right? So now, and it's not just Britain who is the industrialization is not happening only in Britain, but in other European countries as well. So there was a growing competition among the European countries itself. So they wanted to explore many economic opportunities. So with that growing competition, eventually the direct intervention of Britain had to be there, and that had resulted in colonial annexation of many territories. In fact, this competition among the capital exporting countries, we can see that was the origin point, or that was a cause for the imperial rule in Africa as well as in Asia in the 19th century that we've seen. Right. So with that, I will conclude my lecture here as to what are the strategies that capital exporting countries used to give for protecting foreign investment that were made in non-European countries. In the next lecture, we will look at some instances of how the protection had happened, and finally we will look at the challenges to this protection that was given by capital exporting countries. Thank you.